Okay, let me thank you first of all for the kind invitation. Let me say that as it was highlighted by the previous speakers, one of the most significant characteristics of the crisis, the recent crisis, was that basically in the aftermath of the crisis, we've seen very high indebtedness in several euro area economies, especially in the so-called euro area periphery, including countries like Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, and Ireland. High indebtedness not only in the government accounts, but also in the private sector. Now, the second item, private sector indebtedness, is a very serious problem in economies like, for instance, Greece, Cyprus. To give you an indication, the current percentage, the current ratio of non-performing loans to total loans in Greece is close to 35%, and it appears that the ratio will increase further following the imposition of the capital controls and the slowdown in economic activity. In Cyprus, the issue is even more serious. We're talking about an NPL ratio close to 70%, with a component, significant component of that ratio being related to strategic default behavior. So private sector indebtedness is an issue, is a problem, and a major challenge for authorities. Of course, the topic of my presentation today is public debt, and I'll try to, basically, I want to state the key message of my presentation up front. And the message, it was, of course, highlighted by the previous two speakers, is that without a return to positive and significant GDP growth, it will be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to stabilize debt dynamics in highly indebted countries like Greece. This is the key message. You need growth. Mr. Barbieri said, and I think the previous speaker highlighted the key drivers of debt. And there are four drivers: nominal GDP growth, interest rate, and we're talking about the average interest rate on the overall debt stock. So we need to look at the difference between GDP growth and the average interest rate on the overall debt stock. So these are the key significant drivers. Third driver is the primary fiscal balance, and a fourth driver is related to other items, such as privatization revenues. But looking at these four drivers, by far the most important driver is GDP growth. And to give you an example, if you look, for instance, at a highly indebted country like Greece, where the debt, the public debt to GDP ratio is already close to 200%, for every 1 percentage point increase in nominal GDP versus an assumed hypothetical baseline scenario, the debt to GDP ratio declines by 2 units, by 2 percentage points. Whereas, as regards the other two drivers, the relationship is 1-to-1. For instance, for every 1 percentage point improvement in the primary balance of the general government, the debt to GDP ratio declines by 1%. So again, the most significant driver to improve debt dynamics on a sustainable basis is GDP growth. And on that account, there is a problem. We're talking about very low and disappointing growth rates in the euro area. We are talking about very low investment. If you look at the euro area investment spending to GDP ratio, the ratio is still significantly lower than the ratio in the period before the crisis, the outbreak of the global economic crisis. And of course, unemployment is high. So the key question mark is whether countries, highly indebted countries like Greece, for instance, and Italy, and Spain, and other countries, whether we can produce a new environment that will emphasize investment and will attain positive and sustainable GDP growth rates. My presentation, I'll show you a couple of slides. I'll try to be brief because we are running out of time, but I'll talk about Greece. Why Greece? First of all, for a practical reason, I'm an Athens-based economist. Secondly, Greece remains a key risk not only for financial system stability in the euro area, but also for global growth. And third, this is obvious, Greece is the epitome of a highly indebted country with a debt-to-GDP ratio close to 2%, as I noted earlier. But here, I think there are some misconceptions. Over the last several months, we've seen a lot of, let's say, speculation, a lot of reports, newspaper articles, a lot of discussion in the television and by broadcasters that actually Greece has failed dramatically to implement stabilization programs. And this is incorrect, in my opinion, because over the last 5 years, a very significant fiscal consolidation program was implemented in Greece in the context of 2 consecutive bailout programs. The cumulative austerity applied in the country over the last 5 years was close to 30 percentage points of GDP, which is unprecedented by any international standards. And actually, the country managed to improve its fiscal metrics. If you look, for instance, at the graph on the right-hand side, you can see the evolution of the structural primary balance in Greece versus the structural primary balance in the euro area. So if you look at the overall fiscal adjustment in cyclically adjusted terms, and you look at the evolution of the structural primary balance, the adjustment has already been close to 20 percentage points of GDP, so a very significant adjustment. In addition to that, because of the recession, the external imbalance has been already absorbed. Greece has shifted from a current account deficit close to 16% of GDP back in 2008 to small current account surpluses in 2013-2014. Another small current account surplus is expected for this year. There has been a very significant improvement as regards wage competitiveness. And if you look at a proxy of wage competitiveness, which is an indicator called real effective exchange rate based on relative unit labor costs versus major trading partners, you will see that Greece also managed to make a very significant improvement on that account. So wage competitiveness has improved a lot, has improved significantly over the last several years. And of course, in the context of the previous 2 bailout programs, a number of structural reforms were implemented to basically improve the functioning of domestic product and services markets. However, despite this improvement, and as a result of a very aggressive fiscal austerity, very significant fiscal austerity implemented in the country, there has been a very severe decline in domestic GDP. And actually, we, as Eurobank Research made some estimates as regards the recessionary impact of fiscal measures applied over the last 5 years. And according to our analysis, it appears that the front-loaded and very severe, very significant fiscal measures implemented in the country over the last 5 years are fully responsible for the decline of GDP by more than 25 percentage points in cumulative terms over the last 5 years. And of course, as a result of this economic decline, of this depression, let's say, period, depressionary phenomenon, there has been a huge spike in the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate hit a peak close to 27 percentage points of GDP in 2014. The unemployment rate among youth remains above 50%, and you can imagine the social problem created by this situation. And of course, there has been a deterioration in debt dynamics. Greece implemented a fiscal austerity package close to 30 percentage points of GDP over the last 5 years, and instead of managing to reduce its debt ratio, actually the debt ratio increased by around 70 percentage points of GDP in cumulative terms till 2009. So the fiscal austerity actually proved out to be a self-defeating strategy, a wrong strategy to stabilize the dynamics. And according to our analysis, this is not a surprise, and we have indicated that if the fiscal multiplier is higher than 0.47, 0.5 in Greece, then an initial fiscal contraction actually leads into a deterioration in the debt to GDP ratio rather than an improvement. And actually, I skipped some slides to be brief, and I would like to summarize the main points of my presentation. The first issue is that high indebtedness, not only as regards government accounts, but also private sector indebtedness, remains a very significant issue in the euro area, and especially the euro area periphery countries. Second point, and most importantly, we need to return into positive and significant growth rates in order to stabilize the dynamics. Without a return to positive and sustainable nominal growth rates, will be impossible for countries like Greece and several other countries in the euro area periphery to stabilize their debt to GDP ratio, to reduce their debt to GDP ratio towards more acceptable levels. As a last observation, I'm sure you are aware of the more recent facet of the Greek crisis. Basically, a bank holiday was announced in late June. Capital controls were imposed in the domestic banking system and still remain in place. Our view is that following a bank recapitalization, which is in progress and is expected to be completed by the end of this year, we believe that capital controls will be fully removed by June 2015. Greece has signed a third bailout package in late August. And the package provides for significant financing over a 3-year period. There is a commitment by official lenders to proceed with a restructuring of Greek public debt, and this restructuring is expected to take place following the successful completion of the first review. But again, I would like to leave you with this message. For countries like Greece, the key question is whether these countries can return into positive and strong growth rates, not only to reduce unemployment and improve standards of living, but also to stabilize their fiscal situation on a more sustainable basis. And with this point, I would like to thank you for your attention.